I let my husband take everything in the divorce. He had no idea. I don't know if this makes me the asshole, but I need to tell someone what I did. My lawyer called me a chess grandmaster. My sister called me ruthless. My ex-husband called me a fraud, a liar, and about 15 other things I won't repeat here. But here's what actually happened. His lawyer leaned across the table in that courtroom and whispered something. Just 5 words. I couldn't hear exactly what, but I didn't need to. I watched Vincent's face go completely white. The papers in his hands started shaking. Actual trembling, like leaves in a storm. And for the first time in 3 years of planning, of waiting, of playing the long game while everyone thought I'd lost my mind, I smiled.
I'm Alexis. I'm 34.
3 months ago, I finalized my divorce from Vincent Mercer after 15 years of marriage. 15 years. That's longer than some people's entire relationships with their parents. Longer than I've known most of my friends. Definitely longer than my sanity should have lasted, but I'm stubborn. I get that from my grandmother, and she's the reason any of this worked. I met Vincent when I was 17. I'd graduated high school a year early because I was practical and motivated and honestly just needed to get away from my parents' house. Nothing dramatic, just the usual suffocating small-town situation where everyone knows your business and has opinions about your future. I got a job as a file clerk at Henderson and Price law firm. Minimum wage, maximum paper cuts, endless filing cabinets that smelled like old coffee and legal drama. But it was mine. My money, my space, my first taste of independence. By 18, I'd worked my way up to legal assistant. Turns out I was good with details. Good with numbers. Good with keeping my mouth shut and my eyes open, which is basically the entire job description. I learned how to read contracts, how to spot inconsistencies, how lawyers hide things in plain sight with the right language. I didn't know it then, but I was basically getting a master's degree in how to protect yourself when shit hits the fan. Vincent walked into my life at a client networking event when I was 18. He was 24, charming in that specific way, where you can tell someone's practiced their smile in a mirror. He talked about the future like it was a sure thing, like success was just sitting there waiting for him to show up and claim it. He was going to build a real estate empire. Not a business. An empire. Those were his exact words. I said I'd help him file the paperwork for it. Very romantic, I know, but honestly, that's kind of how it was. Practical. We got married when I was 19. People said we were too young, but we didn't care. Or maybe I didn't care because I was 19 and convinced I knew everything. Tyler came along when I was 20, and suddenly I had a husband, a baby, and a part-time job I was trying to juggle while Vincent worked on getting his real estate development business off the ground. I kept working at the law firm whenever I could, building up my 401k contribution by contribution, saving every spare dollar I could scrape together. My grandmother told me something when I was 16 that stuck with me forever. She said a woman should always have her own money. Not secret money, she'd clarify whenever someone gave her a look. Just her own. Something nobody can take from you. Something that's yours no matter what happens. She'd kept her own bank account for 50 years of marriage, and my grandfather never questioned it once. Smart woman. The smartest woman I ever knew, actually. When I was 23, Vincent's business finally started taking off. Like really taking off. He was landing clients, closing deals, getting his name out there. And he needed help. He needed someone to manage the books, handle the administrative work, coordinate with contractors, deal with clients when he was busy. He needed someone he could trust completely. So he asked me to quit the law firm and come work for him full-time. I became his everything. Bookkeeper, office manager, client liaison. I'd show up at properties and coordinate with interior decorators for model homes. I planned the company events, managed the marketing, handled the social media before social media was even really a thing. I did it all while raising Tyler, running our household, making sure everyone was fed and happy and functioning. My official title was wife. My unofficial title was the person who made everything actually work. For 11 years, I poured myself into building Vincent's dream. 11 years of late nights reconciling accounts, of dealing with difficult clients, of making sure contractors got paid on time, of keeping the whole operation running smoothly. And for 11 years, Vincent got all the credit. Every industry award had his name on it. Every celebration was about his vision, his hard work, his success. At networking events, I was Vincent's wife. At company parties, he'd thank his team, his mentors, his drive and determination. Somehow he never quite got around to thanking me. I noticed when things started shifting. It was gradual at first. He'd make decisions about the business without mentioning them to me until after. He'd stay late at the office more and more often, coming home at 9, 10, sometimes 11 at night. He started criticizing little things. The way I dressed wasn't professional enough. The meals I cooked weren't interesting enough. My lack of ambition was holding us back. Lack of ambition. I was running his entire back office for free, raising his son, managing his life, and apparently I lacked ambition. That's the thing about being invisible labor. When someone doesn't see the work you do, they assume you're not doing anything. 3 months ago, on a Tuesday evening, Vincent came home while I was making his favorite dinner, chicken marsala. I'd stopped at the expensive grocery store specifically to get the good mushrooms. He sat me down at the kitchen table with this expression on his face. Not sad. Not apologetic. Just matter of fact, like he was about to discuss a business transaction. He said, "I want a divorce. I want the house, the cars, the business. Everything. You can keep Tyler." He said it like he was ordering lunch. "I'll take the assets, hold the child. Thanks." Like Tyler, our 15-year-old son, was some kind of inconvenience he was graciously allowing me to keep. Like a leftover nobody wanted. I just stared at him. 15 years of marriage ending right there at our kitchen table, between the salt shaker and the butter dish. Like I was just another thing he was done with, ready to be discarded. What I didn't know in that moment, what I found out later through Tyler, was that Vincent had been planning this for months. He already had a lawyer lined up. Harold Whitfield, expensive and well-connected. He'd been building his exit strategy while I was meal prepping and scheduling his dental appointments. I'd been completely blindsided by a man I'd trusted with literally everything. The next day, his mother showed up. Lorraine Mercer. This woman had treated me like the help for 15 solid years, and she arrived at my door with her perfectly styled hair and this practiced sympathy face that didn't reach her eyes. She sat me down, patted my hand, and told me I should have tried harder to keep Vincent happy. "Men have needs, dear," she said, like she was explaining calculus to a slow student. This is coming from a woman whose husband spent 7 days a week at the golf course specifically to avoid being in the same room as her. But sure, I was the one who failed. That first week was a complete blur. Vincent moved me to the guest room. He had documents drawn up, settlement proposals ready, timelines established. Everything was moving so fast I felt like I was drowning. Everyone who saw me saw a woman whose world had just collapsed. A wife being thrown away after 15 years of service. A victim who never saw it coming. But here's the thing nobody knew. 3 years ago, I found something. Something buried deep in Vincent's financial records. Something he thought was hidden forever. And I'd been quietly, patiently preparing for this exact moment ever since. Within a week of his announcement, Vincent had completely taken over. The guest room became my permanent space in what used to be our home. My walk-in closet got reduced to 2 small sections he graciously allowed me to keep. The message was crystal clear. This isn't your house anymore. 2 weeks later, he started bringing her around. Brittany Sawyer, 27 years old. Worked at his company, of course she did. She had that Instagram-perfect look going on. Blonde highlights that cost more than my monthly groceries, perfect manicure, yoga pants with designer logos. She walked into my kitchen like she already owned it. She wore my apron. My grandmother's apron, the one with little blue flowers that I'd had for 10 years. She wore it while making smoothies in my blender. She was younger than my marriage, younger than my favorite handbag, but hey, she made amazing smoothies. So that's something, I guess. Vincent paraded her around like a trophy he'd just won. They'd sit on my couch watching my television, eating off my plates. He'd put his arm around her right in front of me like I was a piece of furniture that couldn't see or feel anything. Like I'd already stopped existing. The humiliation escalated daily. First, he canceled my personal credit card. "We need to separate our finances," he said, like he was being reasonable and mature about the whole thing. Then the joint card. Then, he suggested I should probably find somewhere else to stay while we sorted things out. My own home. I was being asked to leave my own home. Lorraine came over to help me pack. By help, I mean she went through my belongings like she was running an estate sale and decided what I deserved to keep. Old clothes?
Fine.
Family photos? Some of them. My grandmother's recipe box? She actually hesitated on that one, like she was considering keeping it for herself. I had to physically take it from her hands. What I was not allowed to take: any jewelry Vincent had bought me over 15 years. Any furniture I'd personally picked out. Anything of actual value. Those were marital assets, Lorraine explained in this patient voice. Vincent was entitled to them. She packed my things in garbage bags. Not boxes. Garbage bags. Like I was literal trash being taken out to the curb. Through all of this, I had one person I thought I could trust. Diane Holloway. We'd been friends since high school. 20 years of friendship. We'd been through bad boyfriends and worse breakups, through weddings and babies, and every milestone in between. She was the first person I called when Vincent dropped his bomb. And she was so supportive. Always checking in, always asking how I was holding up, always ready to listen when I needed to vent. She'd come over with wine and tissues and let me cry on her shoulder. She told me I deserved better. She told me Vincent was making a huge mistake and would regret it. All the things a best friend is supposed to say. Except something felt off. Little things that didn't quite add up. Vincent seemed to know my plans before I'd even finalized them. When I mentioned to Diane that I was thinking about fighting for the house, Tyler came home the next day saying his dad told him that wouldn't work out. When I told Diane I was looking at apartments in a specific neighborhood, Vincent made a comment about how that area was too expensive for me now. Then one night it clicked. I was looking back through old photos on my phone and I saw it. The way Diane lit up in pictures when Vincent was in the frame. The way she'd always compliment him just a little too much, laugh at his jokes just a little too hard. She always asked about him first, whenever we talked. How's Vincent? How's the business going? Is Vincent happy? She'd been carrying a torch for my husband for 15 years. And Vincent, because he collected admirers like some people collect stamps, knew exactly how to use that. He made her feel special, important, different from other women. He probably implied they'd get together after the divorce was finalized. Gave her just enough hope to keep her loyal and reporting back to him. My best friend of 20 years was his spy. 20 years of friendship sold out for some flirting and empty promises from a man who uses everyone around him. At least negotiate a better price, Diane. Have some self-respect. But the worst part wasn't Vincent. Wasn't Lorraine. Wasn't even Diane's betrayal. The worst part was watching what it did to Tyler. My son saw everything. The girlfriend wearing my apron. The grandmother packing my things in trash bags. The way his father looked at me like I was nothing. And Vincent was working on him, dripping poison in his ear day after day. Your mom's making this difficult. I just want everyone to be happy. She's the one dragging this out. I'm trying to be fair, but she won't cooperate. Tyler started pulling away from me. Not angry exactly, just distant.
Confused.
He didn't know who to believe, and his father was very, very convincing. I could handle losing the house. Could handle losing the money, and everything I'd spent 15 years building. But watching my son look at me like I might be the problem? That was the knife that actually drew blood. I hired a lawyer. Nina Castellano, recommended by someone at my old firm. 52 years old, sharp as broken glass, absolutely zero tolerance for bullshit. She reviewed my situation and immediately laid out our battle strategy. You helped build this business, she said, tapping her pen on the files in front of her. You're entitled to half of everything. The house, the company, all the accounts. We fight for it all. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I asked, what if I don't want to fight? Nina stared at me like I'd started speaking in tongues. Like I'd suggested we send Vincent a thank you card and a fruit basket. She thought I was broken.
Depressed.
Too beaten down to stand up for myself. She had absolutely no idea what I was actually planning. I moved into a small apartment with Tyler. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen the size of my old pantry. Half our boxes didn't even fit. They sat stacked in the corner of Tyler's room like a monument to how far we'd fallen from our old life. Meanwhile, Vincent was posting photos online with Brittany. New chapter, new energy, blessed. He wrote under a picture of them at some trendy restaurant. Lorraine commented underneath, so happy for you, sweetheart. You deserve joy. My sister called me furious. You need a shark lawyer. Take him for everything he's worth. Everyone had advice. Everyone thought they knew what I should do. Everyone saw a woman who'd given up, who couldn't fight back, who was letting her husband walk all over her. Everyone was wrong. Here's the thing about being underestimated. People stop watching you carefully. They stop guarding their secrets around you. They get sloppy. And that's exactly when you learn everything you need to know. 3 years. That's how long I'd been carrying this secret. That's how long I'd known the truth about Vincent Mercer and his glittering, glamorous, completely hollow empire. It started on a Tuesday night, 3 years before the divorce. Vincent was working late again, which by then was basically every night, though I didn't yet understand what working late actually meant. I was going through the company books, reconciling accounts, doing the unglamorous work that kept everything running. And I found something strange. A transfer to an account I didn't recognize. Then another. Then a pattern. Money flowing out of our accounts into places I'd never seen before. Couldn't identify. I dug deeper. I stayed up until 3 in the morning following the digital paper trail, clicking through statements and records, cross-referencing everything. What I found made my blood run cold. Vincent had been taking loans against everything we owned. Everything. The house. Our beautiful house that everyone admired. The one we'd supposedly owned outright for years.
3 mortgages on it.
The original loan of $400,000. A second mortgage of $350,000 taken out 4 years ago. A third mortgage of another $350,000 taken out 2 years ago. Total owed, $1.1 million. Actual current value of the house, $850,000. We were underwater by $250,000 on a home I thought we owned free and clear. The business was even worse. Lines of credit maxed out at $200,000. Back taxes owed of $85,000. Vendor debts of $120,000. Equipment loans of $75,000. The company Vincent bragged about at every party, the one that was supposedly thriving and successful, it was drowning in nearly $500,000 of debt. Even the cars weren't real. All 3 were leased with balloon payments coming due. We didn't own anything. We just had very expensive monthly obligations that made us look rich. I sat in my kitchen at 3 in the morning surrounded by printouts and bank statements and did the math. Total debt, approximately $1.9 million. Total actual asset value, maybe $1.6 million if we were lucky. We were $300,000 in the hole, maybe more. But where had all the money gone? I kept digging over the following weeks, tracing every transaction I could find. The picture that emerged was devastating. Cryptocurrency investments, $180,000, all lost. Gambling, $75,000 gone. An apartment I didn't know about, rented for a woman I didn't know about, $60,000 in rent and furnishings over 2 years. Lifestyle expenses that never made it home. Watches, suits, trips I was never invited on. Another $85,000 just vanished into thin air. My husband wasn't building an empire. He was building a house of cards. With borrowed cards. That were also on fire. We looked rich the same way a mannequin looks alive. Convincing from a distance, completely hollow up close. My first instinct was to confront him. To scream. To cry. To demand answers for what he'd done to us. But I knew Vincent. I'd watched him operate for over a decade. If I confronted him directly, he'd manipulate me. He'd explain it away, make it sound reasonable, make me feel crazy for questioning him. He'd probably find a way to blame me for not understanding business or not trusting him. And worse, if he knew that I knew, he might try to get control of my separate money too. The money that was actually mine. See, I'd always kept something of my own. My grandmother's voice in my head. A woman should have her own money. My IRA from my law firm years. I'd rolled it over when I quit but never touched it, never commingled it with household funds. By that point it had grown to about $180,000. That was mine. Earned from my job before I ever worked for Vincent. Legally separate property. And then there was Grandma herself. She'd passed away when I was 28, and she left me $340,000 in her will. The will was specific. This money is for Alexis alone, for her security and independence. I'd kept it in a completely separate account for 6 years, never using it for household expenses, never letting Vincent have access to it. My grandmother kept her own account for 50 years of marriage. Not secret money, she'd always say. Just mine. Smartest woman I ever knew. I had roughly $520,000 that was completely legally, separately mine. Vincent couldn't touch it. Couldn't claim it in a divorce. Couldn't use it to pay off his gambling debts or his cryptocurrency losses or whatever other financial disasters he'd created. So,
I didn't confront him about the debt.
instead, I protected myself. I worked with my uncle, a retired accountant I trusted, to create an irrevocable trust for Tyler. My IRA and my inheritance went into that trust. My name wasn't on it as a beneficiary. Vincent's name certainly wasn't on it. It was solely for Tyler's future. College, a first home, emergencies. And it was completely untouchable. Then I documented everything. Every mortgage document, every hidden account, every suspicious transaction, every loan statement. I printed copies and kept them at my sister's house. I put copies in a safe deposit box at a bank across town. I saved everything on an encrypted drive. I built a paper trail that was bulletproof. And then I waited. I knew Vincent would leave eventually. Men like him always do. They get bored, or they find someone younger, or they decide they deserve more. I just had to be patient and be ready when it happened. 3 years of waiting. 3 years of watching him dig the financial hole deeper. 3 years of smiling at dinner parties while knowing our entire life was built on quicksand. I got very good at patience. Very good at pretending I didn't know my husband was financially drowning us both. When Vincent finally asked for the divorce, when he sat me down and demanded the house, the cars, the business, everything, I almost laughed out loud. He wasn't demanding assets. He was demanding debt. Mountains of debt. An avalanche of debt.
He just didn't know it yet.
Back in Nina's office, I sat across from her and placed 3 binders on her desk. 3 years of evidence. Every mortgage document, every loan statement, every hidden account, every transaction I'd tracked and documented. She read in silence for almost an hour. When she finally looked up, her entire expression had transformed. "You've known about this for 3 years," she said slowly. "I was waiting for him to leave. I knew he would eventually. And when he demanded everything, he demanded all the debt too. He just doesn't understand that yet." Nina leaned back in her chair. The pity was completely gone from her eyes. The concern was gone. What replaced it was something like awe. "So, when you sign over the assets in the divorce, I walk away clean. He gets the mortgages, the business debts, the lease obligations. All of it becomes his sole responsibility the second he signs. And your inheritance, your retirement account. Separate property. Never commingled. Legally protected. Sitting safely in a trust for my son." Nina was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled. A slow, dangerous smile I'd never seen before. "Mrs. Dunst," she said carefully, "I believe I owe you an apology. I thought you'd given up." I smiled back. "Everyone thinks that. That's kind of the whole point." Nina went from looking at me like a lost kitten to looking at me like a chess grandmaster who'd been planning this game for years. "I prefer grandmaster. Better wardrobe." The trap was already built. The numbers were all verified. The documentation was airtight. All I had to do now was let Vincent think he was winning. And nobody does gracious loser better than a woman who's been practicing for 15 years. The next 3 months were a masterclass in acting. I became exactly what everyone expected me to be. Broken, defeated, barely holding on. I showed up to mediation sessions with red eyes and trembling hands. I spoke softly, hesitantly, like a woman who'd lost all confidence in herself. I asked for almost nothing. "I just want enough to start over," I said during our second mediation session, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not trying to be difficult. I know the business is his life's work. I know the house means everything to him. I don't want to tear our family apart more than it already is." I requested $50,000 cash, my personal belongings, and shared custody of Tyler. That was it. That's all I asked for after 15 years of marriage. Vincent agreed immediately. He was probably expecting me to fight for half of everything, which is what any reasonable lawyer would demand. Instead, I was asking for crumbs from our marital table. He looked at me across that mediation table with something almost like pity. Like I was a wounded animal he was graciously putting out of its misery. I deserved an Oscar for that performance. Or, at least a Golden Globe. I was playing the role of a lifetime, and my only audience was my lying, cheating, soon-to-be bankrupt ex-husband. With each passing week, Vincent's arrogance grew. He stopped being careful, stopped even pretending to be the reasonable one. He started telling everyone who would listen that I hadn't even fought back. She just gave up, he told his golf buddies. I offered her a fair settlement, and she took it without a word. I guess she finally realized she had no leverage. Lorraine was even worse. She bragged at her book club, her church group, every social gathering. Vincent is keeping everything. That woman didn't get a dime. I always knew she wasn't strong enough for my son. To celebrate his upcoming victory, Vincent bought himself a new watch.
$15,000.
I know because I saw the charge on the business account before I lost access. He was still using company money for personal expenses, still digging that financial hole deeper with every purchase. He wore it to our next mediation session, making very sure I noticed it, like it was a trophy.
Like it proved something.
He also took Brittany to dinner at La Maison, the fancy French restaurant where we'd celebrated our 10th anniversary. He posted photos on social media. Life is good when you're with the right person, he wrote. The right person. He meant the person who didn't know about his debt yet. The person who thought she was dating a successful businessman instead of a financial disaster in an expensive suit. Meanwhile, Brittany had started redecorating my house. New furniture in the living room, new art on the walls. And she painted my kitchen. She painted it gray. Builder grade, boring, soul-crushing gray. I'd spent 3 weeks choosing that sage green color. 3 weeks of paint samples taped to the walls, checking them in different lighting, driving myself crazy trying to get the perfect shade. And she painted over it with gray. Like it was nothing. Like my choices didn't matter.
Gray.
Like her personality. Like her future with Vincent once she discovered the truth. Very fitting, actually. Diane kept calling, fishing for information under the guise of friendship. I played along perfectly every time. How are you holding up? She'd ask, her voice dripping with fake concern. I just want it to be over. I'd tell her, letting my voice crack slightly. I can't fight anymore, Diane. I don't have the energy. Within hours, Vincent would know. I could see him relaxing more and more, letting his guard down even further. Diane thought she was playing me. She was actually just being an unpaid messenger service. Not even a very expensive one. But while the adults played their games, Tyler was watching everything. And my smart, observant son was starting to notice things that didn't add up. He noticed his dad's new $15,000 watch but heard Vincent tell him they couldn't afford the school trip to Washington, D.C. that cost $300. He noticed Brittany's shopping bags piling up in the foyer but heard Vincent complain that money was tight and we needed to be careful. He noticed the massive disconnect between the lifestyle his father was projecting and the excuses he kept making about expenses. One evening, Tyler came to my apartment and sat down at my second-hand kitchen table. He looked at me with those serious eyes, so much like his father's, but with something Vincent had lost years ago.
Honesty.
Mom, he said quietly, is Dad actually rich? I looked at my son for a long moment. What do you think? He was quiet, processing his own observations. I think something's not right. I think he's pretending. I reached across that cheap table and squeezed his hand. Trust me for a little longer, okay? Just wait. My 15-year-old son figured out something was wrong before 2 lawyers and a certified accountant did. I should bill his college fund for consulting fees. Behind the scenes, Nina was preparing our legal strategy with surgical precision. The main divorce agreement stated clearly that I was relinquishing all claims to marital property. The house, the business, the vehicles, everything would go to Vincent. In exchange, I would receive my modest cash settlement and walk away. But attached to that agreement was an addendum, a detailed liability disclosure statement. Every debt, every mortgage, every loan, every legal obligation tied to those assets. When Vincent signed for all the assets, he would be legally assuming all the liabilities. The mortgages would become his sole responsibility. The business debts would transfer entirely to him. The lease obligations on the cars would be his problem alone. It was all there in black and white. Legal, proper, completely devastating. Legal documents are like poetry, Nina told me. Boring, expensive poetry that can ruin someone's life if they don't read carefully. My favorite kind of poetry. 2 weeks before the final hearing, Harold Whitfield called Nina with concerns. My client is assuming significant assets, Harold said carefully, choosing his words like he was walking through a minefield. I'd like to request a full financial audit before we finalize, just to verify everything. Nina kept her voice completely neutral. Of course, we'll provide whatever documentation you need. But when Harold brought this suggestion to Vincent, my soon-to-be ex-husband shut it down immediately. No audits, Vincent told him firmly. I built that company. I know exactly what it's worth. I'm not paying some accountant to tell me what I already know. Harold pushed back because he's a good lawyer and he could smell trouble. I strongly recommend we verify the asset values before you sign anything, Vincent. This is a significant. No, Vincent cut him off. Brittany wants this done. I want this done. No more delays. Harold had been practicing family law for over 30 years. He knew when a client was about to make a catastrophic mistake. He also knew he couldn't force someone to take his advice. So, he presented Vincent with a waiver, a document acknowledging that Harold had recommended an independent financial review and that Vincent was declining against his attorney's advice. Vincent signed it without even reading it, just like he'd sign everything else without reading it carefully. Never underestimate the power of an impatient girlfriend to make a man skip the fine print. Brittany was worth millions to me in legal strategy. The night before the hearing, Vincent sent me a text message. Thank you for not making this ugly. I stared at that text for a long time. 15 years of marriage, 15 years of building his business, raising his son, managing his entire life, and he was thanking me for not making things difficult while he threw me away like garbage. I typed back, I just want what's best for Tyler. And I meant it. What was best for Tyler was his trust fund, his future secured, and a father who was about to learn the most expensive lesson of his life. Nina called me that evening, Thursday at 9. Final hearing. Judge Patricia Holden. Are you ready? I looked around my small apartment. The second-hand furniture. The boxes finally unpacked in the corner. The tiny kitchen I'd painted sage green because it reminded me of hope and new beginnings. I've been ready for 3 years. 3 years of waiting, and it was finally here. I felt like a kid on Christmas morning, if Christmas morning involved divorce court and financial revenge served ice cold. Thursday morning, 9 a.m. Vincent would walk into that courtroom expecting to collect his prize. He had no idea he was about to inherit a financial avalanche. One he'd signed for himself, in writing, with witnesses. Thursday, April 17th. 9 a.m. courtroom 4B. I remember every single detail of that morning. The way the sunlight came through the tall windows, the smell of old wood and floor polish, the quiet murmur of lawyers shuffling papers and whispering to clients. This was where 15 years of marriage would officially end, and where 3 years of patience would finally pay off in full. Vincent arrived first, of course. He was wearing his best suit, the charcoal Armani I'd helped him pick out for a client dinner 3 years ago. His new $15,000 watch caught the light as he shook hands with Harold. He looked confident, relaxed, like a man about to close a very favorable business deal. Brittany was waiting in the hallway. She wasn't allowed in the courtroom for the proceedings, but she wanted to be there for moral support. I caught a glimpse of her through the door as I arrived. Perfect makeup, designer bag, scrolling through her phone like this was just another boring appointment she had to sit through. Lorraine was there too, sitting in the gallery like she was attending a theater performance. She'd dressed up for the occasion, probably already planning Vincent's celebratory lunch afterward. She looked at me when I walked in and gave me this little smile. The kind you give someone you've already beaten. I arrived a few minutes after Vincent. Simple navy dress, no jewelry, hair pulled back in a low bun. I looked tired, defeated, like a woman who had nothing left to fight for. Perfect. I looked like someone who'd given up on life and fashion simultaneously. Very convincing performance. I really should teach acting classes. Judge Patricia Holden entered, and everyone rose. She was in her early 60s, silver hair, reading glasses perched on her nose. 30 years on the family court bench. She'd seen every trick, every manipulation, every lie that divorcing couples could throw at each other. Nothing surprised her anymore. She reviewed the case file briefly, then looked up. Mercer versus Mercer. Final dissolution hearing. I understand the parties have reached an agreement. Harold stood first. Yes, Your Honor. My client Vincent Mercer is assuming all marital assets, including the family residence, the real estate development business, and all associated vehicles. In exchange, Mrs. Dunst receives a cash settlement of $50,000. Mina rose beside me. That's correct, Your Honor. My client agrees to relinquish all claims to these assets and accepts the proposed settlement terms. Judge Holden's eyes moved to me. She studied my face for a moment, clearly looking for signs of coercion, signs that I was being pressured into a bad deal. Mrs. Dunst, she said carefully, I need to confirm that you understand what you're agreeing to today. You're giving up your claim to substantial property. The family home, the business you helped build for over a decade. Are you certain this is what you want? I kept my voice soft, slightly unsteady. Yes, Your Honor. I understand. And you're entering this agreement voluntarily? No one is pressuring you? No, Your Honor. I looked down at my hands, then back up at her. I just want my husband to have everything he asked for. I want this to be over. The judge studied me for another long moment. I could practically see her internal debate, whether to push harder, whether to order a continuance, whether to protect me from what looked like a terrible decision. But I was represented by counsel. I was answering clearly. I was an adult woman making my own choice, even if it seemed like a bad one. Very well, she said finally. Let's proceed. The clerk distributed the final documents. Page after page of legal language, signatures required on every third page. Vincent signed eagerly, barely glancing at what he was agreeing to. He just wanted this done. Wanted to get back to his new life with his new girlfriend and his new freedom that I signed slowly, deliberately. Every stroke of my pen was careful and precise. This was the moment I'd been waiting 3 years for. I was going to savor every second of it. Across the courtroom, I saw Vincent glance at Lorraine and smile. She nodded back approvingly, like everything was going according to plan. In the hallway, his phone buzzed. Probably Brittany sending encouraging emojis or whatever. He actually checked his phone. In court. During his own divorce hearing. That's exactly the kind of man he was. Meanwhile, Harold Whitfield was doing what good lawyers do. Reviewing the complete document package one final time before everything became official and irreversible. Main agreement signed. Asset schedule signed. Settlement terms signed. Then he reached the addendum, liability disclosure statement, and I watched his face as he read it. Watched the confusion flicker across his features. Watched him flip back a page, then forward again, like he was hoping he'd misread something important. He hadn't. Harold's face went pale. He leaned toward Vincent, trying to be discreet. Sir, he whispered urgently, we need to talk. Vincent waved him off, still basking in his victory. Not now, Harold. We're almost done here. Sir. Harold's voice was more urgent now, with an edge of panic. You're assuming all debt. Vincent turned to look at him, annoyed at the interruption. What? The liability disclosure, Harold whispered, papers rustling as he pointed to specific lines. The mortgages, the business liens, it's all here. You're assuming personal liability for everything. For the first time all morning, Vincent actually looked at what he'd signed. Really looked at it. I watched his eyes, scan the numbers. Watched the color drain from his face like someone had pulled a plug. House, $1.1 million owed. Market value, $850,000. Business. $480,000 in combined debts. Vehicles. $115,000 in lease obligations. Additional personal liabilities. $200,000 total debt. Approximately $1.9 million. Net value of everything he just claimed. Negative $300,000. He hadn't won the lottery. He'd won the bill for the lottery. Vincent stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. This isn't right. He looked at me, then at the judge, then back at the papers in his shaking hands. She hid this from me. This is fraud. Judge Holden's voice was sharp as a knife. Mr. Mercer, sit down. These numbers are fake, Vincent insisted, his voice rising with panic. She manipulated the documents. This is, Mr. Mercer. The judge's tone left absolutely no room for argument. Sit down now. He sat, but his hands were shaking. His confident smile was completely gone, replaced by something that looked a lot like pure panic and the first hints of understanding. Judge Holden looked at the documents in front of her, then fixed Vincent with a hard stare. Mr. Mercer, I'm looking at the liability disclosure statement attached to this agreement. These are debts associated with assets you are claiming. Assets in your name. Your business. Your property. She paused deliberately. Are you telling this court that you don't know your own financial situation? Silence. Complete, devastating silence. Watching Vincent try to explain why he didn't know about his own debts was like watching someone try to explain why there's a broken vase on the floor while holding a baseball bat. Fascinating and completely unconvincing. Harold cleared his throat. Your Honor, I should note for the record that I advised my client to conduct an independent financial review prior to this hearing.
He declined.
I have documentation of that advisement. He produced the waiver. The one Vincent had signed without reading. The one that said in clear legal language that Harold had recommended a full audit and Vincent had refused against legal advice. Judge Holden reviewed it briefly. So, Mr. Mercer was advised to verify these figures.
He chose not to.
He signed a waiver acknowledging that choice. She looked directly at Vincent. Is that correct? Vincent was staring at the waiver like it was a snake that had just bitten him. I didn't. I thought. Is that your signature, Mr. Mercer? A long, painful pause. Yes. Then you assumed this risk voluntarily. You had the opportunity to investigate. You chose not to. Judge Holden's voice was completely matter-of-fact. The agreement stands. Vincent turned to me, desperation breaking through his composure like water through a cracking dam. You knew. His voice actually cracked. You knew about all of this. I met his eyes calmly. I was your bookkeeper for 11 years, Vincent. Of course I knew about everything. His face cycled through emotions faster than I could count. Confusion, rage, betrayal, fear, and finally, the one I'd been waiting 3 years to see. Realization. The complete understanding that he'd done this to himself. I want to withdraw the agreement, Vincent said, turning desperately back to the judge. I didn't understand what I was signing. This isn't fair. Judge Holden shook her head. Mr. Mercer, you signed documents before this court stating you understood and agreed to all terms. You were represented by competent counsel. You declined additional review when it was recommended. Your wife did not hide anything from you. These are your debts, your mortgages, your obligations. All in your name. She paused, letting that sink in. The agreement is final. The gavel came down with a sharp crack that echoed through the courtroom. Mrs. Dunst, you have your settlement. Mr. Mercer, you have the assets as agreed, along with all associated liabilities. This marriage is dissolved. I stood, smoothed my dress, picked up my purse. Then I looked at Vincent one last time. He was slumped in his chair, papers scattered in front of him, his whole carefully constructed world collapsing around his ears. You said you wanted everything except Tyler, I said quietly. I gave you exactly what you asked for. I walked out of that courtroom without looking back. In the hallway behind me, I could hear Vincent's voice rising, yelling at Harold, demanding to know how this happened, threatening lawsuits and appeals and God knows what else. Harold's calm, patient responses. I told you to get an audit, Vincent. I have it in writing. You refused against my legal advice. Through the glass doors, I saw Brittany's face change as she listened to Vincent's panicked explanation. Saw her look at him, really look at him, and see something other than the successful businessman she thought she'd been dating. She was gone before I reached the elevator, moving fast on her designer heels. Not looking back, Brittany's exit was faster than her entrance into my marriage. At least she was consistent in her priorities. I stepped outside into the April sunshine. The sky was bright blue. The air was warm. Somewhere behind me, my ex-husband was screaming at his lawyer about fairness and fraud and how none of this was his fault. Ahead of me was a new life. Smaller than before, simpler, but completely, entirely mine. The collapse happened faster than I expected. Within 2 weeks, Brittany had moved out of the house. Just packed her things in the middle of the night and left a note that said, "This isn't what I signed up for." The gray kitchen sat empty and depressing, exactly like she'd left it. Within a month, Vincent tried to sell the house. But when you owe more than something is worth, there are no buyers. Just banks calling about missed mortgage payments and realtors gently suggesting a short sale would be his best option. Within 2 months, the business started defaulting on obligations. Vendors filed lawsuits. The line of credit was frozen by the bank. The company that Vincent had spent 15 years building, the company I had spent 11 years supporting, was crumbling into dust and broken contracts. Within 3 months, Vincent was meeting with bankruptcy attorneys. The man who'd once bragged about his empire at every party was now calculating which assets he could protect from creditors. The answer was almost nothing. Lorraine's perfect golden boy was calling family members asking for loans, showing up at relatives' houses with excuses and explanations. Nobody knew about the debt. Alexis must have hidden it somehow. I was tricked. But the documents told a different story. The mortgages were in his name. The loans were in his name. The gambling debts, the cryptocurrency losses, the secret apartment for his previous girlfriend, all his choices, all his signatures, all his decisions that I heard through Tyler that Lorraine's Christmas newsletter that year was very, very short. Vincent is exploring new opportunities. Yes, opportunities in debt restructuring and financial recovery. Very exciting. The parallel conflicts resolve themselves with a kind of poetic symmetry that I couldn't have planned better if I'd tried. Diane called me about a week after the hearing. Her voice was shaking. I had no idea things were this bad for you, Alexis.
I'm so sorry.
I never meant for. I thought Vincent and I didn't answer. Didn't respond. Didn't give her the closure she was clearly looking for. Some bridges aren't meant to be repaired. Some friendships don't deserve a second chance, especially when they were sold out for 20 years' worth of winks and empty promises from a man who used everyone around him. She tried calling 3 more times over the next week. Then she stopped. I imagine she's still waiting for Vincent to notice her now that Brittany's gone. She'll be waiting a very long time. Lorraine tried a different approach, going through Tyler to reach me. Tell your mother I didn't know about the money problems. Tell her I'm sorry for how I treated her. Tell her I want to talk and explain. Tyler looked at his grandmother, the woman who'd packed his mother's belongings in garbage bags, who'd called his mother worthless and weak, who'd sided with his father without asking a single question, and said very calmly, "Mom's busy building her life. She doesn't have time for excuses right now." Lorraine wanted forgiveness. I wanted peace. Guess which one of us got what we wanted? Tyler, my wonderful, smart, observant son, finally understood everything. Not because I sat him down and explained it all, but because he figured it out himself by watching and listening and being smarter than the adults around him gave him credit for. He saw the court documents when they arrived. He heard his father's desperate excuses. He watched Brittany leave without looking back. Watched Lorraine scramble to save face. Watched the whole carefully constructed facade collapse into rubble. One evening about a month after the divorce was finalized, he sat with me in my small apartment. The one with the sage green kitchen. The one with the secondhand furniture and the boxes finally, fully unpacked. You waited 3 years, he said quietly, looking at me with new understanding. You knew this whole time, and you just waited for the right moment. I wanted to make sure you were protected. I told him honestly. Whatever happened between your father and me, I needed to know you'd be okay, no matter what. The trust fund. $520,000, safe and completely untouchable. His future secured regardless of what happened to anyone else. He was quiet for a moment, processing everything. Then he hugged me. Really hugged me. The kind of tight, meaningful hug I hadn't gotten from my 15-year-old son in months. The kind that said, I understand. The kind that said, I'm proud of you. Teenage boys don't usually hug their mothers voluntarily. I knew I'd done something right, and why $50,000 settlement went toward getting properly established. First month's rent, security deposit, basic furniture that wasn't falling apart or secondhand. It wasn't luxury, but it was stability. Real, solid stability that nobody could take away. The trust fund stayed exactly where it was. Tyler's future. College, maybe a first home someday, a safety net that nobody, especially not his father, could ever touch. And me? I enrolled in interior design courses at the community college. The dream I'd put on hold when I was 23 to help Vincent build his empire. Finally, at 34, I was building my own. I started small. My first real client was a woman named Sandra. 52 years old, just ending a 28-year marriage. She was standing in her empty new apartment looking completely lost when she asked me, "How do you even start over after something like this?" I thought about it for a moment. One room at a time. One color at a time. One day at a time. We painted her kitchen sage green. She cried when she saw it finished. Happy tears, she explained, wiping her eyes. It's the color of new beginnings. About 3 months after the divorce was finalized, Vincent showed up at my apartment. I barely recognized him at first. He'd lost weight, but not the healthy kind. Dark circles under his eyes. His suit was wrinkled. His expensive watch was gone, probably sold or pawned. He looked like a man who'd been through a war and lost badly. He stood in my doorway, and for just a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I didn't know it was this bad, he said, his voice quiet and defeated. I made mistakes. I know that now. But I didn't mean for any of this to happen to us. I leaned against my doorframe and looked at him. Really looked at this man I'd loved for almost half my life. This man who'd throw me away like garbage. This man who is now drowning in the consequences of his own choices. Can we talk? He asked desperately. Maybe we can figure something out together. I don't know. Maybe we could. He couldn't even finish the sentence. Couldn't bring himself to ask for what he actually wanted. My help. My money. My forgiveness. After everything he'd done. You asked for everything except Tyler, I said calmly. You got exactly what you wanted. Alexis, please. Goodbye, Vincent. I closed the door. He stood in the hallway for 10 minutes. I know because I watched through the peephole while eating ice cream directly from the container. Best entertainment I'd had in months. 5 stars. Would watch again. That evening, after Tyler went to bed, I sat in my small living room and looked at my grandmother's photo on the shelf. Her recipe box sat next to it, the one thing Lorraine had almost taken, the one thing that mattered most because it came from the smartest woman I'd ever known. You were right about everything, Grandma, I said quietly to her picture. Keep your own money. Know your worth. And never let anyone make you feel small for protecting yourself. The apartment was quiet. Small. Nothing like the big house I'd lived in for 15 years. But it was mine. Every paint color, every piece of furniture, every single decision, completely mine. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I was free. Really, truly free. I don't know if that makes me an asshole. Maybe it does. Maybe I should have warned him, should have been more generous, should have taken the high road everyone's always talking about. But I spent 15 years building his dream while mine sat on a shelf collecting dust. I spent 3 years knowing the truth while he planned to throw me away. And in the end, I just gave him exactly what he asked for. Sometimes the best revenge isn't hurting someone. It's just letting them hurt themselves while you step out of the way. And sometimes being underestimated is the greatest advantage you can have. I'm building my business now. My designs, my clients, my future. Tyler's thriving in school with his future secured. And Vincent? Vincent's learning that empires built on debt and lies don't last very long. I sleep pretty well these days.
Alright, I'm out, but the next story is already on the way.